Welcome to episode 2 of our series on tree to table. Today we're going to take this rough piece of walnut here and turn it into dining room table legs. Stay tuned. So if you're relatively new to woodworking and you haven't really developed an eye for what things can look like in the rough, believe it or not, this is going to be a set of 4 beautiful walnut dining room table legs. Today I'm going to show you how to get into all this excess material and take those legs out of this. One thing I want to do is I want our legs to be in the rough. I want them to be about 34 inches long and I want them to be about 3 inches square, which is what they call 12/4 by 12/4. In the woodworking world, lumber is always referred to by the 1/4 inch of thickness, 1/4 of an inch. So if I had 4 of those, what have I got? I've got a 1 inch thick board. Well, let's say I've got 8/4 of that inch. What does that equal? Well, now I've got a 2 inch board. The legs we're getting ready to make for our walnut table are 12/4 thick. So that's going to equal 3 inch thick legs. So our 3 inches by 3 inches is what our table is going to be referred to as. So if I'm going to my lumber yard and I walk in there and say, hey guys, I need some cherry boards that are going to come back and say, okay, you need 8/4 thick lumber. Well, what happens if I want a piece of wood that's 1.5 inches thick? 6/4. So it's always referred to by that 1/4 of an inch of thickness. So if I'm buying 1 inch thick boards that are 8 foot long and 6 inches wide, I've got 4/4 lumber that's 8 foot by 4 by 6 inches. So I've got 4 board feet of lumber ultimately. So 1/4 inch is the important thing. So don't be afraid of that when you hear somebody at the lumber yard talking about 1/4 inch thick lumber. That's all it means. It's just sold by the rough thickness of the wood in 1/4 of an inch. So now that we understand the thickness dimension of our lumber in quarters, I want this to be 12/4 thick. And what I'm looking at here, and I can see from the end, is the center of this tree is actually right there. That's the dead center of the tree. That's called the pith, P-I-T-H. So we want to avoid that. That's the most vulnerable section of a piece of wood, is that pith. We don't want that. So we want to come over here and come around that to get our 3 inches out. We're not going to take that section. You'll see here we've got a big check in this board. It's just a check. It's just where when the tree was alive, it dried and it split apart at that check. So we're going to take that out of the equation. Same thing with our other end down there. And I can see that that pith runs right through there. I kind of see that crack. So we're going to want to come over here to get to our piece. And like I said, we want that to be about 34 inches long ultimately. So we're going to make it 36. And we're going to take that pith out of there. We want it to be about 3 inches wide. We're going to start somewhere in here and give us an idea what 3 inches looks like. About there and there. So we're going to come beside those. We're going to start out roughing it in at about 4 inches. And one of the things you'll see here that we want to avoid as well is this sapwood, the lighter white color stuff, that's got some bug holes in it. The bugs got into this somewhere along the line, and they typically like to eat the softer, more damp wood in the tree, so they'll eat into the sapwood here. They don't generally, with walnut and a lot of others, get into the heartwood and all, so we're pretty good there. So we can get this section out of there. We can probably pull another 4 inch piece out of here pretty easy by getting rid of some of that. So that's going to be the basic outline of our 2 pieces there, our piece there. So that's going to give us 2 legs. We're going to come down here. We'll end at the same spot here because we want to avoid all this. That's not something we want to use. We're going to come into here. Let me step over here and grab a straight edge quick. That'll make this a little easier to do.
While you do that, Tim, I have a beginner question for you.
Okay.
Is it because you have so much material available, or because there's something you know that a beginner might not know, that you wouldn't just use the wood on either side of the check? Like, why cut this? Is it because you have so much other good
Well, and there's great question. Why are we not using this section down here? One, there's a check on the bottom. I can see it comes all the way over there. So it's not wide enough on this side to get much out of. And on this side over here, just because of that check there, I don't want to use that. And there seems to be a bit of a knot right there that we want to try to get it around. So all I'm looking to do is we've got the material here. I'm looking for the prime spots out of it and looking for the best of the material in this piece. So I'm going to mark this one off.
Because you're not just looking for material, you're looking for select material.
I'm looking for the best pieces of this that I can see. So that's going to give us a piece there. And we can cut this edge along here to avoid some of the bug damage. That's 36, so that'll give us plenty. And we've got 6 there. So we should be able to get around the pith of the tree and get into some of the better material with this. So probably the first thing that we're going to really do with this is I'm going to cut it across this way. And then we'll come up in here and we'll cut this off somewhere up in here. And then hope we can get to the dimensions that we need by coming down into here and making those cuts. So with that, the first thing we're going to do is figure out how to cut this. Probably right there.
On this raw number, are you just using chalk for your marker?
I'm just using chalk for my marker because I'm not even in the ballpark of where it's going to end up. We're just getting close. Let's see what the other side of this looks like. If there's any cracks or checks on the other side. Yeah, that side actually looks a little better even. A little less stuff. There's a little bit of a pith section right in here that we'll have to get around. But we can do that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get our length dimensions squared away.
So it's a good tip to remember that all wood has 2 sides.
And it generally comes that way when they cut it into pieces. So let's take, what's going to be our best shot to cut that in half? We'll grab our track saw and be able to get through most of that. I don't think we'll get all the way through because of the thickness, but we can finish it off with a handsaw. So let's take a pause here so I can get my track saw set up, and we'll cut down through this a number of times and get rid of some of that waste on the ends. Here we are, we're set up to cut our long piece of walnut in half. Fortunately, I was able to acquire a track saw recently, so that's what I'm going to use. If you don't have that, take a 2x4 and clamp a 2x4 or screw a 2x4 into your piece and run your regular circular saw up against the 2x4. If that doesn't work for you, get out a handsaw and let her eat with a good old everyday handsaw. That'll get the job done too. The thing that's important is you can only take a light pass. It's going to take multiple passes to get through this. Fortunately, this will go pretty close to 3 inches, and our piece is pretty close to 3 inches thick, so we're probably going to be able to get through it most of the way with the track saw. If not, we'll finish it up with a regular handsaw. I'm going to turn on my dust collector on this. We're just going to make multiple light passes through this. I'm going to hold the track in place. It's got rubber feet on it that'll keep it pretty tight to the deck and all. So we're going to go ahead and cut through this a little bit. Let me turn our dust collector on. On in full blast. Don't forget these, like I almost did. Protect your ears because this can get pretty loud as well. I like to pull my cord up over my shoulder so I know where it's going to be, so it's not going to get in the way of anything. Hold my track down, fire this up. Take that first pass. Put our blade a little deeper. And make our second pass. And I'm not looking for perfection in my cut here. I'm just looking to get it in the ballpark. It's staying lined up there pretty well. We're almost here. I think one more pass will get it. We'll definitely finish it off the old-fashioned way with a handsaw. Okay, that's as deep as we can get with the track saw. Let's turn this off. Did we get all the way through it? Not quite, but boy, it's going to be awful close. Can't quite feel it through there, so we've probably got not even a quarter of an inch yet. So we'll just come over here to our handsaw. Finish it with that. And this is why we like power tools. Right there we go. Put our saw down. Let's look at the end of that. Boy, isn't that pretty. Look at the end of that. And again, right here, we have the dead center of the tree. That pith right there. So we're going to make our cuts somewhere out in here. Somewhere out in here. To try to avoid that. We'll do the same thing on this side. We're not interested in that pith part of it. We want to be right about in there. That still gives us enough dimension across there to get our 3 inches out of it. Oh yeah, we can get what we need out of there. So that's going to work out good. That's going to turn out real good. So that's going to make that a whole lot easier to handle. I think what we'll do is we'll take these aside. The supports to keep it up off the table. And we're going to pull this one back over here. We're going to go to length. Both sides of our board are supported, both sides of the cut. So I need to get a couple of these down here. We're just going to do that same thing again to cut these to length. And that's where our cut's going to be. Once we get them cut to length, then we can take them over to our bandsaw and do the ripping that we need to do in those to make it all cooperate. So we'll get our track saw fired up again. And we've got 38 there, so that's more than enough. Let's fire our dust collector back up. Make our cut a lot shallower.
Why do you take multiple shallow cuts?
Because it's easier on me, it's easier on the tool, it's easier on the wood. I just like to make multiple shallow cuts rather than one 3-inch deep cut. It's hard to do, and I would rather not have to deal with hard to do things. Let's get this on there. Here we go. Now, fortunately, with this plunging track saw, it starts out here, we release it and we can lower it down into the wood. Here we go. And normally, if this were on sawhorses or something, I would lock the track down because there are specific clamps just to do that. I would do that with them, but here I'm just relying on the rubber feet that are on the bottom of the track to keep it lined up. Because again, we're not looking for precision here, we're just looking to rough cut this. down to the last dimension. And we've got a little pinch going on here. This is simply from our, there we go. I think we've got a little pinch going on there, which just means that our supports on both sides of our piece are not holding it up. So it's basically, it's collapsing a little bit this way and it's pinching the blade a little bit. So that's why I stopped. We'll just finish off the last bit of it. The handsaw again. Let's turn off this extra noise. We don't need that. We'll just finish off the last dimension with the old handsaw again. But I have the same thing happen in that it's pinching it again. So let's put a little bit taller piece up here and pull it down a little bit. Now it won't pinch. Away we go. Something that might be helpful too when you're handsaw and stuff is I want to keep the saw plate, the handle, and my forearm pretty much all in the same line. So I'm kind of standing off to the side a little bit here to make sure that I can do that. I can run all this almost like a piston here in one straight shot. Let's put one other one underneath there to keep it down. There we go. Notice I've got a straight line going all the way through here. If I come in here like this and start cutting on that, I've got my arm coming this way, so I've got energy going that way. I'm trying to make it go this way. What it's going to do is it's going to cause my saw to bind in there, and it's going to make it a lot more difficult to cut. So stand aside, get that piston all running in the same direction. Why is this catching on here? There we go. We got our straight line cut and we're right through it again. Very nice. Boy, that is some pretty walnut. We're gonna have to make something unique out of this piece here. Look at that, just that. Look at how tight that grain is in there. It had to be a very slow growing tree. Nice tight grain patterns like that. That's a pretty incredible piece of wood right there. Like I said, this sat in a barn for like 30 years after it had been cut down, and now the family of this farm wants a beautiful dining room table made out of this. So that's what we're doing. They cut this down, like I said, about 30 years ago, just for the to save this wood. Now it's going to finally get turned into something pretty amazing, which is going to be a walnut dining room table. We'll slide this over here, and we'll set this other one up to cut it to length as well. Further off of it and come in. And that dust collection is so great. It picks up a lot of dust. Didn't get all of it, but it got the vast majority of it. We'll finish this by cutting it off this way. Again, keeping that straight line with the blade, the handle, my forearm. And there we are. Most all the way through. There we go. There we go. Now we'll slide through there. Just like that. I mean, look at that. You can't see it so much on this side as you can on that one, but boy, that is some pretty walnut.
It almost smells like pipe tobacco.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like a cherry cabinet in here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what walnut does. So there we go. Now we've got our pieces a little more on the rough-sawn side of the equation. It's going to make for some pretty stuff. I think what we'll try to do is we'll try to split this right on that pith. We'll split it there, then we can join it. We can cut our width dimension off of it and then cut that out. So we are cut the length. Now we're going to take it over to the bandsaw and rip it down the center. And it's a heavy duty piece. We're going to get out the old heavy duty aluminum square. Normally we would use this for doing drywall, cutting drywall up. But we've got a pretty straight edge here. I just want to run a guideline down through the center of this. Because I'm going to take it over. We're just going to freehand it on the bandsaw. And that's going to be our line. That'll work. And I'm just going to make it a point to cut on this side of our line. We're going to set our bandsaw up to where we've got at least 3 inches of clearance between our table and our guide. So we're more than good there. We'll lock all this into place. Make sure we're tied down real good. And we are ready to go with our bandsaw. That'll cut that and do a good job of that. Yeah, I just put a new blade in there. It's a pretty narrow blade, but it'll do what we need it to do. So we'll fire this up and we're going to cut that down through there. Get our ear protection going. And it won't be a perfect cut, but we're not looking for perfection anyway. Keep it out of the way. Nice and easy through there. Going for a nice straight line. And the key to getting a straight line cut on your bandsaw is keeping it in place. I'm not moving my arms left and right and moving my upper body. I'm getting it locked into place, and I'm literally bending at the waist. And you'll see it shows one side of that line to cut on. It's getting pretty close. And Wes is going to grab that other end down there and hold that up. Like this. You got a little bit of drift on my blade there, but that's going to happen with the bandsaw. All right, there we go. Turn that off. I'll go ahead and grab both of those. And we open that up, and that's what we've got. Like I said, we were trying to avoid the pith, which is the dead center of the tree, and here's a perfect illustration of what that is. The pith is right there. That is the dead center of the tree. That little hollow area right there is smack on the money dead center. So that we're going to take that off eventually. We'll take all that off as we come out this way to get to the good stuff that we want. So that one's cut, and you can see as we went right through it, there's a little more of it right there. You don't want to use that in your piece. Not good for anything but burning. But look at the grain pattern in that. It's going to be just gorgeous.
So for that little bit of amount to remove, is that jointer?
We'll clean this up with a jointer. That's what we'll do next. We'll clean this edge up with a jointer, which is why we kind of want to get it as straight as we can. And then we'll rip the rest of it down, probably with multiple passes on our table saw. And then to get the opposite side clean, then we'll come and clean this one off to get to our dimensions. So let's see what we've got here.
Now for those at home, why didn't you just rip it like that on the table saw just now?
Because I didn't have any kind of a straight edge to start from with the table saw to use the fence as a guide. So we had to come with the bandsaw and get it as close as we could. And then we'll joint it, because ultimately what we're looking to start with is we've got to have some flat reference surface somewhere in the deal. So this is going to be our flat reference surface to start with. And then what we'll do from that one is we'll come over and create this one. Then we'll come back and take off what we want on this side. And that reference surface will give us a face to run up against on the joiner to get an opposite side nice and flat. So let's take this one. Let's just do this one. We'll take this one. We got a pretty straight line there. It's fairly good. Let's take that over to our jointer and show you how we're going to clean up all four edges that we're ultimately going to make here. So our jointer, we're going to run this edge against the fence, and it's going to give us a flat surface down here to use as our primary reference point. And it's not all going to be perfect until we get it through the joiner and the planer and the table saw and all that, but we got it fairly close there. So let me turn on some dust collection here quick. And let's open up our dust collector here for the jointer. And we'll run this through enough times to get it cleaned up. Cleaned up face there. That's going to work. Now we can take this face against the fence on our bandsaw to cut it to width this way and get rid of the rough side over here. So now we've got a nice clean reference surface here on that edge. I'm going to take it over to our bandsaw here. We're going to cut the width to this to width. I normally like the live edge, but this is not a live edge piece, so we're going to set our fence here at about 4 inches and get rid of most of that live edge and still have hopefully an inch of material to play with. So we're going to go over here about there, and all we got to do is be in the ballpark. Ballpark is all we need. We're going to get our ears back in order. Left those over here. And we'll rip this one down as well. Then we got enough to clear everything there. Here we go. like a new bandsaw blade. And your bandsaw is set up right. Just take it nice and slow and let that blade do its work. Notice there's nothing on me, none of my fingers, my hands are not anywhere near the plane of that blade. I don't want anything to slip and drive forward and end up going into that blade. So now I've gotten to this end, I got the majority of my weight cantilevered out over the other side. I'm going to come back here and grab it this way. Knock that edge off of there, clean that up. And we got a good bit of character in there. For example, here we've got a bit of a knot. There's a knot in the table there. We'll get around most of that because ultimately we're going to end up with table legs that are going to be in the neighborhood of 28 inches long, and that's all the way out there at 34. So we've got plenty of opportunity to get around that.
Now, why would you want to get around a knot?
Because it might be a little less unstable, and it, you know, in some cases you like to keep them and use them as part of it. But being a table like this, we might try to get around some of that. And when you cut off pieces like this that have got bug holes in them, I tend to take it and throw it outside of my shop just in case there's any active bugs still in there. And this sat long enough to where had there been active bug work going on in there, it would have pushed out little piles of dust that would have been evidence. So there's pretty much nothing live in there, but I still get dispose of them, get them outside the shop, and we'll take them to the dump and get rid of them eventually. Cool, so that gives us a good reference surface, a good width dimension here. So now we can take this edge that's nice and clean, we can put this up against our fence on our jointer to give us a straight edge here. We are back at the jointer. We've got one edge that we've jointed already nice and clean, so we're going to use that as our reference surface to go up against our fence to give us a clean face on our board. And I can see that our board is kind of a little bit of a bow in it, kind of on both sides. So this is the side that we're going to choose to go down with. And we'll make it a point to hold this up nice and tight to that fence as we're going through. And it'll give us a clean face here that's 90 degrees from the face here. Let's get our ears, let's get some dust collection, and away we go. All that first pass got us was a little clean there, clean on the back. Multiple passes again are the key. perfectly clean face here. And another perfectly clean face opposite of that, right at 90 degrees. So that's two sides of our board cleaned up real well. What we'll do now is we're going to run over to the surface planer and get our thickness dimension off of both of those flat surfaces. That's going to work out real nice. So, yeah, very much better. Okay, off to the surface planer we go. We're going to start by getting our thickness dimension this way. So we'll use this as our reference surface, and we'll plane this side down here to catch up to the other side. Okay, we're going to open this up a whole bunch because we're still well beyond 3 inches thick here. Yeah, right at 3. We'll end up clean, probably 2 3/4. I sure like the fact that that works so well that it'll go down with that. I'm going to take this well beyond where I want to cut it. I'll turn the dust collector on, open up our gate here. And at this point, when I start this up, I'll crank this forward. It'll engage. And then I'll go about another half a turn and it'll start to cut. And that'll give us our starting point. Let's open this one up. We'll close this one up. Focus all of our dust collection on one machine. See, there's a whole lot of little pit marks like this, which are kind of little chip outs, which just means that we're going against the grain there. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn this around and go the other way. See if that improves that. You know, stuff like that, we don't want. That just means we're going against the grain versus with the grain. Now we'll see what that looks like after it goes through again. Against the grain is now gone. And you could hear it when it was going through there. The snapping and the cracking. You know, a little piece like this right there. The one against the grain that popped out. So now we're going to flip it up. We've got our other clean surface here. We're going to take this side off and clean it up. Through a bunch of times. This is actually the side that we want to keep. Our pith is down here. Doing that till we get down to a dimension that's consistent with this one. And Squirt wanted to go for a ride this morning. Ah, no, don't make me go through the machine. Well, we're making pretty good progress there. Go to 2 3/4. 3/4 on that dimension. That'll be our final dimension there. And we've got about 3 3/4 there. So we're just going to take this over, knowing that we had planned already to take this off because that's where the pith is. And we'll get rid of that section. We'll get rid of that. We're going to take this over to the bandsaw and take about 3/4 of an inch off of that to get it down in the neighborhood that we want it to be, and then we'll finish it off with the planer here. So let's take it over to the bandsaw quick. So as we planned earlier, we're going to take this pith of the tree off there. We've established our thickness this way at 2 3/4. We're at 3 3/4 here. So we're going to knock about 7/8 off of that just to get rid of it with our bandsaw. And then we'll finish the processing of this with the planer to make it to our final dimension. So let's cut this last section off. The bandsaw's coming pretty handy today. I have yet to really cooking. Found a good way to extract sawdust from a bandsaw. As you can see, it's getting all over the place here. Again, there's nothing in my hands that's in line with that blade, so if something's going to slip and go through, my hands are nowhere near it. And there I'm going to come on this side and finish this. Here we are. Look how pretty that is. And this table is going to have drawers in it, 2 on each side. So that might be a drawer side right there. So we'll hang on to that. That's a beautiful piece of walnut to use for something. So now we've got this edge cleaned up and nice and straight. Let's go over here to our planer again, and we'll finish getting that side equal to the other sides. And how did we do dimension wise here? Well, close to 3 and 7 or 2 7/8 all the way around. Take off a little bit more and clean it up. Chip out in there, so we're going to turn it around end for end and send it the other way. So that is beautiful, air dried, non-steam walnut with a lot of character to it. Same dimension both ways. I just ran through this way. I'm going to turn it this way. Okay, we'll just apply this little amount. So having done both access and change it off, I'll be certain that that's perfectly square. Same dimension both sides. A beautiful example of walnut leg. just to satisfy all of our curiosities, we're going to put a square up on this and see that it is dead on the money square all the way around. There we go. What a beautiful, beautiful piece of walnut. Started out as this, turned in to this. We've got plenty of extra dimension there. Our table, as most dining room tables are, the top of the table is typically 30 inches off the floor. And we don't know for certain how thick our top is going to be yet, depending on what happens when we mill the material down for the top. But we've got about 39 inches worth of material there. So if we end up somewhere in the neighborhood of 28 to 29 inches, somewhere in there, we'll determine whether we want to keep this character in this knot as part of that table or not. If that's the range of our final dimension, the rest of it's pretty clean. You know, look at this. Look at this piece here. Look at how beautiful that is. That is beyond cool. That just says I grew up on a farm in King George County, Virginia. And now I get to be a beautiful dining room table that's ultimately going to live in California. Pretty cool. So we went from this to this. Now we only have to do it 3 more times. 3 more times to get 3 more legs that match this perfectly. It certainly helps with your ability to envision what something can be when you see it go from something that looks like this down to something that is just gorgeous like that. That's beautiful walnut with beautiful character. That's going to make for a really, really nice piece of furniture. So the next time we get together, we will have the other 3 legs done and ready to go. And then we'll work on the aprons that we're going to make for this, which will be an interesting challenge because both sides of the table are going to have 2 pull-out drawers on them that are going to be able to hold silverware and placemats and things like that. So train your mind's eye. You can see this inside of this. That intuition is valuable. And one of the other things that we illustrated here that you hopefully noticed was we got all the way down from rough-sawed lumber, rough-sawed big plank of walnut, all the way down to a perfectly cleaned up leg, ready to be cut the length, jointed to attach the aprons and on it, sanded, finished and all this. And we never once touched a table saw. You don't have to have a table saw in your shop to do work like this. It proves that it can be done. All the way down to that, we used a straight edge to mark it out with our chalk. We used a track saw to cut it to length, what could just as easily be done with a skill saw and a 2x4 nailed into the rough sawed board. We used a jointer a couple times. We used the bandsaw a couple times. We used the thickness planer a couple times. All that to get to that point without using the table saw anywhere in the shop. So the point there is it can be done. It can go from this to this with just a minimal amount of tools, minimal number of tools, and minimal effort. So there you have our table legs. We'll come back next time and we'll have 4 of them versus just 1. If this is your first time joining us, this series is called Tree to Table. And what we're doing is we're taking this pile of incredible walnut that was harvested about 30 years ago and spent its life in the top of a horse barn, and we're turning it into a beautiful piece of family heirloom furniture. So check out the link above to see that video.